An article from Sportsnet came out today outlining a mock trade that Montreal could do to acquire star Bo Horvat from the Vancouver Canucks. We'll be breaking down that mock trade and what we think of it. Plus, another article came out saying that Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton want to add another young goaltender to Montreal's core before the trade deadline. We'll be talking about all of that on this edition of Habs Digest. Hello, bonjour, ahoy, and welcome to today's news edition of Habs Digest. I'm your host, Josh Gosse, alongside my co-host, Jesse Poirier. And before we get into the video, guys, subscribe to the channel. You guys have been doing great recently. You've been watching our videos a ton, but we can use that support. If you haven't hit the subscribe button on our daily content, it'd really help us out, and we'd really appreciate it. Jesse, I know we've been hearing some talk about Bo Horvat over the past week or so, but we had another article today that made a mock trade that says Bo Horvat really could go to Montreal, and we're gonna have some input on our thoughts here because this trade is a little interesting. So let's just get straight into it without all the fluff. Here's what the proposed trade from Dixon at Sportsnet said. Montreal Canadiens get center Bo Horvat. Vancouver Canucks get defenseman David Savard, defenseman prospect Jayden Struble, center prospect 18-year-old Owen Beck, a 2023 first, which would be Florida's first-round pick, unprotected this year, and a 2024 third-round pick. Now, on paper, if you look at the quality of Bo Horvat, he's 27 years old. He's really well respected in Vancouver. He's on pace for almost 50 goals this season, I believe, if not more. But the problem is he's an upcoming UFA. So, and does he really fit Montreal's timeline being 27 years old? There's a lot of questions about this. Jesse, what do you think of this trade package? Do you think it'd be smart for Montreal to give up such a highly touted prospect like Owen Beck and some first round picks and a veteran D-man in Savard for a guy like Horvat who we're really not even sure will stay?
It's really tempting because this guy isn't no slouch, but I would have to say that I would not do this trade. And I find just a big reason, my major takeaways for that is because it forces us to make a decision on the future of Kirby Dach a little bit too soon, a little bit too hastily right now than maybe we should, because a lot of people could say like, okay, no, it's a no-brainer. Put Dach on your first line and, have Bo Horvat as your 2C behind him. But the thing is that centermen in this league, and especially young centermen like Kirby Dach, the potential of that is so valuable that you don't want to get rid of that potential possibility down the road. You don't want to do that and eliminate that because Kirby Dach's either a 1C or 2C. He can't be anywhere else if we're going to put him at center. So I think it just forces us to make a decision on that just a little bit too soon at this point in time.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, actually, because a lot of the reasoning I saw, even in this article, well, I'll bring up some of the reasoning here quick in the article that one of the authors had to say. He said, yeah, the Habs are in the midst of a retool, but Horvat's young enough that he could be a player they value now and 6 or 7 years from now when he is 32, 33, 34 years old. He fits best as a 2C, works best behind Suzuki, and they can just keep Dach at the wing to not break up the first line. And he also goes on to say, as for the trade package, he thinks Vancouver is interested in players who can help now or very soon, rather than a boatload of pure futures. I assume he's talking about guys like Struble, Beck, and picks. But that said, a first rounder is non-negotiable if you're Vancouver, which is fair. And they look for the first that Montreal got from Florida last year for sending Ben Sherratt over. So even if Montreal added a top 5 protection, it could be a desirable pick. With all that said, yeah, I think Vancouver is probably saying, yeah, okay, that seems like a reasonable offer, especially for a guy that they may not even be able to keep. But Jesse, you make an awesome point. This article and other people that I've seen talk about this trade seem to say, oh, it's a foregone conclusion. We can just stick Kirby Dach on the wing. But you're right. I don't think that's necessarily best for his development. I think it'd be good to get him a lot more center reps, and we don't really want to play him at 3C if we can help it. This guy clearly has a ton of potential. He has so much chemistry with Suzuki and Caufield that forcing him into a wing role just to fit a 27-year-old veteran who will be here in through his 30s is kind of interesting. But I also see him from the other side because Horvat's an elite face-off guy. He's a great goal scorer, has 30-goal seasons. He's a 60, 70-plus point guy every single year. He's a guy that every contending team would want. There's actually an article that came out just before we started recording this from Marc Dumont at Montreal Hockey Now. And he said he hates the idea of the trade. He thinks even just the idea of giving up Beck, let alone a couple first-round picks. A guy like Beck, who is improving defensively as an 18-year-old, showed that he really should have been a first-round pick this year. For Horvat, is asinine because he quotes Horvat as being an aging veteran with a murky future. Yeah, I think that the future is murky, but as we discussed before the show, Jesse, like, these deals are not assuming that Horvat's dipping, like, immediately. And Montreal get nothing. This is assuming he agrees to a long-term extension. if he did agree to a long-term extension, do you think, like, let alone the trade package, do you think he'd be a good fit as a 2C behind Suzuki for a long-term, maybe Montreal Cup run within the next 5-6 seasons? Or do you think, like, maybe his potential or his game will drop off by that time and we might be biting the bullet a bit on that contract?
I mean, I'm interested. He's a really good player. Like, he scored 22 goals so far this season. What I really like is he's a shoot first type of player, which I think is great because we have a lot of setup men on this team. That being said, is I find right now we have a lot of players that are talented, whether it be Dadonov, Hoffman, Drouin, where for sure they have the skill, but there needs to be a correlation between that and winning hockey games. And I'm not going to put all of, the woes of the Canucks onto Bo Horvat. I don't think that that's his fault, but just I think the main reason for myself, Josh, that I wouldn't do this trade as tempting as it really is just because if there's 1 year where you don't want to give up your first round draft pick, it's this year.
It's a great point with the likes of Bedard, Fantilli. Like, if one of the picks, Montreal's or Florida's, ends up jumping up to the top 5, even say top 4, whatever the draft format is, like, that center could be easily a Brock Besser or more long term in the future. That would fit Montreal's timeline a bit better, and we wouldn't have to give up the likes of Owen, Beck, or Jayden Struble. So, yeah, I think this trade, while we've seen a lot of rumors, people think that Montreal, a team that really maybe shouldn't be buying, could be a potential landing spot. I'm kind of on board with you. Like, I think it would be exciting. To be honest, if I saw the news tomorrow that Bo Horvat was traded for that package, I'd be like, okay, sure, let me watch all the Bo Horvat highlights in the world and let me get excited. I wouldn't be utterly devastated, but objectively, I think that, maybe it's not the best decision for Montreal long term. But that, speaking of long-term success for Montreal, that kind of transitions us well into the second topic today, Jesse. Another article came out saying that the Habs, or not an article, a tweet and an article to go along with it, said the Habs are looking to go for a goalie prospect before the trade deadline. Look at, actually, do I even have the tweet there? No, I don't have the tweet. I guess not. But either way, it was a tweet came out in French that said a guy from, what was it? BPM Sport, a French reporter by the name of Maxime Truman, BPM Sport. He said the Habs are looking to trade for a goalie. He said from his ear, from some people close to him, he said Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton are looking to add a young goaltender for the future for Montreal before the trade deadline, and they tossed out a few names. And I'm going to toss out some names to you, Jesse, and not everyone here will know these guys' names because, let's be honest, they're goalie prospects. Not all of them are really well known, but we know some of them, and let's have a quick look. So, number one here is Tarasov, Daniil Tarasov from the Columbus Blue Jackets. Tarasov is an interesting prospect. They say here, with goalies taking more time to develop, Montreal could be exactly the right spot for a Tarasov to come and get some consistency and playing time. He's made some insane saves, had some great games when he's been in the NHL, but just he's kind of that goalie that is not amazing in the AHL behind poorer defenses. So I feel like if Montreal was to get him soon, with their defense course still learning, maybe it would be tougher for him, but as a reclamation project, maybe it could work. Number two, Devon Levi. This might be my favorite. Levi, of course, playing with the World Juniors not too long ago. He's sort of a star as far as young goalies go, and he's been great for Buffalo. I know they love him, but as they say here, General Manager Kent Hughes and head coach Marty St. Louis are extremely familiar with him as he plays with their sons at Northeastern University. He's got experience playing behind Canadiens youngsters like Jordan Harris and Jayden Struble, and he's a local-born player to boot. I think Devon Levi would be amazing. I love him as a prospect. It's so cool that he already has connections to the Habs. Jesse, the other two names were Dustin Wolf from Calgary, who is an American goalie prospect, also looks phenomenal, but he's stuck behind Markstrom and Vladar. And then you have Askarov from Nashville, who they mentioned, who I don't think there's any shot because he's one of the top goalie prospects in the league. I don't think Nashville ever would, but I know I've spoken for a couple minutes in a row here, Jesse. Is there one goalie prospect here that you like better than the others, or do you think like maybe the asking price right now is too high for a young goaltender from Montreal?
No, I think for a player like Devon Levi, you go in all the way because that's really, when we're looking at where we need to shore up in the future, like Samuel Montembeault is playing great. But we need to remember that Jake Allen, he's on an expiring contract, just 2 years, so we do need to make a move on this in the future. And we do need to make a move on it in the near future because you want to allow some time for that prospect to develop within your system and to be ready by the time that Allen has to go. So I do expect to see the Habs making a move on this in the near future. Now, whether that's through getting a prospect, because I think with our timeline, we don't want to we maybe don't want to draft, even though it might be tempting. in this year's draft. And just because with the timeline, it might take a little bit longer. We want somebody with our core group of Caufield, Suzuki, Dach, all of our amazing defensemen. So I would really, really like to see this happen because I think it's one of the main points that we need to shore up on this team right now.
Yeah, I think so too. But I do wonder what the asking price might be. Like, I feel like Buffalo's not going to let him go for anything less than a first round pick and a good prospect, and maybe even more. Same thing for the likes of Dustin Wolf from Calgary. Even though I feel like Wolf might be easier to get because he's stuck behind Markstrom, who is just an excellent goalie, and Vladar, who they just signed to a decently long contract. Like, Calgary probably wants to ship him out the most out of any goalie that we've listed here. Maybe Tarasov of Columbus too, but I like Wolf more as a prospect than Tarasov. So, I mean, would you be willing to give up maybe a first round pick and maybe a second and one of the Habs prospects for a backup goalie? Do you think that need is really that pressing for Montreal with the fact that all we have now is Allen and Montembeault, and it feels like Primeau might really never make the cut at the NHL level?
I think we have to, just because, we have so many prospects and that we're so lucky, especially on our left-handed defense, where it's like, we're not even going to have enough spots for all of this. So we're going to need to definitely transfer those assets into something we can actually use that will be beneficial for our team. So Habs fans, definitely keep an eye out for that. I think it's just an inevitability. And if you are going to use that surplus of prospects, especially on defense, I think a great way to spend that would definitely be in a young goalie.
I think so too. I think it's awesome that they've named these goalies. Now again, they've named these goalies. These goalies are not necessarily on the market. They're just targets that Montreal could go after. But especially Levi, like I think there's a connection there that maybe could lead to something. And knowing Kent Hughes, if he wants a prospect, if he wants a player, I think he'll try his best to go out and get him. So it'll be very, very interesting leading up to the deadline. Boy, we'll have so many videos, so much news to break down as we get closer to there. But as of now, that'll do it for this edition of Habs News. I'm your host, Josh Gosse. For my co-host, Jesse Poirier, we love the support you've been giving us, and we hope to catch you in the next video.